How often do you come across the phrase passive income? What is it really? Here are 5 important things that you must know if at all you're going to put in place successful passive income relationships. If you derive value from this installment, kindly consider rewarding me with only 4 things. Consider rewarding me with a follow, a like, a share, and let's interact in the comment section. It will really help us with the algorithm. The subject matter around passive income is confusing with every passing day. This is because no one has ever given an authoritative definition on what passive income is. So the things that we do at the marketplace, in as much as we are not engaged at it directly, we imagine for some strange reasons that that is passive income. An individual will go and acquire treasury bills, imagining that treasury bills is passive income. Another individual will go and invest in an insurance product, imagining that that is passive income. So what really is passive income? The ongoing body of knowledge out there is that passive income is that money that you generate when you are asleep. In as much as that might be tempting, but really, what do you need to put in place so that you can earn when you are asleep? What do you need to consider if at all that infrastructure of inactive generation of revenue will work on your behalf? It's very important in any area of subject matter. As long as you are an entrepreneur at the marketplace, it's important to constantly consider, do I understand what I'm doing? Do I understand what I imagine to understand? It's important similarly to understand that in order for what you think you understand to qualify as an understanding, it must influence a corresponding level of activity. And that activity ought to originate from what you understand. So let's go back and ask ourselves, what is passive income? In that there is no authoritative definition on passive income, allow me to give you my most authoritative definition of passive income. We own the copyright to this definition. Passive income is that income that a principal generates inactively out of the active engagement of their agent. So it's very important that in order for you to even imagine that you're generating money in passive income, you must at all times regard yourself as a principal. And that principal must automatically require the appearance of an agent. So if there is no that principal-agent relationship, however you generate money, that does not qualify as passive income. So it's important to know that passive income is available to all of us. The infrastructure of generating money in passive income or in passive aspects is available to all of us. You could generate money passively from your copyright. You could generate money passively from your trademark. You could generate money passively from your industrial design. So it's very important for us to understand if what is available to you is copyright, then at all important times you need to ask yourself, how do I position myself with this copyright so as to identify as a principal? That is the most comprehensive definition you will ever get on passive income. Allow me just to repeat it. Passive income is the income that a principal generates inactively out of the active engagement of their agent. So what are those 5 important things that you must know if at all you're going to put in place passive income relationships that are successful? Number 1, the most important relationship in passive income is the relationship that exists between a principal and their agent. The money that you give to your banker At no time does your banker ever become your agent. The money that you take for an insurance product, at no time will the insurance underwriter qualify as your agent. So it's very important for us to ask ourselves, then at what point do I become a principal? Because if you are not a principal, then you are not going to determine the intervals at which passive income will generate. So who is a principal? A principal is any person that puts in place an infrastructure that requires the participation of an agent. That is the most classic definition of what or who a principal is. So who is an agent? An agent is an entity or an individual that works in the person of the principal, that works in the stead of the principal. So that means that in all engagement at the marketplace, we constantly need to look at the relationship that I have with this entity. Does it qualify as a principal-agent relationship? A typical example: an individual has put 100 million Kenya shillings on a development, and this development has given 20 units, apartment units. So that individual does not wish to engage directly with the tenants, and he requires someone to engage in his stead, in his place. So that individual requires an agent. So one, the principal is the landlord, the agent is the agent. So that automatically puts in place any funds that the agent will be forwarding to the principal qualifies as passive income because the principal is not involved directly. Money never works on your behalf. Money only works in your place under the instrumentation of a third party. That third party might assume different positions, but in the place of passive income, that third party must assume the position of an agent. So that is the most important thing that you need to understand. With your copyright, the relationship that exists between me and a CMO, does the CMO work as my agent? And that relationship qualifies as a passive income relationship. That is the first and the most important thing that you need to know. Number two, in passive income, there is what it's called elasticity of generating revenue. This is what it means. A landlord has put in place 100 million to put up a structure. That structure has given that landlord 20 units. The earnings from these 20 units is capped not until that landlord either hikes the rent or that landlord goes and sets up another unit entirely. That is what is known as the elasticity of passive income. You must understand that in order for you to grow passive income is always static. Passive income lacks elasticity because in order for you to improve the intervals of earning, there is a corresponding level of equivalent investment to the initial one that is required on your place as the principal. That is a very important thing that no one ever talks to you about it. If at all shares is supposed to qualify as your passive income, then you need to constantly update and increase your share ownership. If an investment is to be regarded as passive income, that investment will require on your part to constantly improve and update your investment. Passive income has elasticity. Passive income is always static. That is very important that no one talks about it to you. So you will always think that I will put in an investment and I will continually generate revenue. No. The level you put in is the corresponding level of what you're supposed to expect. The third important thing that you must know is that the inactivity of the agent translates to the inactivity of passive income that the principal generates. What that simply means is this: if a principal has a lazy or dormant agent, then you are not going to generate money. This is contrary to what we have always been told, that money goes to work on your behalf. Money never goes to work on your behalf. Money is static to the extent of the dormancy of the person in whose hands it is. So that means if we go back to our initial analogy, I am a landlord. I have put in place a development. That development will only generate 400,000 every month, to the extent that the agent is active to ensure that there is an ongoing tenancy as far as that development is concerned. So let me ask us a question. To the point whereby there is no tenancy in that development, do you think as a landlord I qualify to expect 400,000 every month? That is what it means. So it's very important, whenever you want to put in place a passive income relationship, it's always important that that relationship be preceded with an engagement or an instrument that will always ensure the activity of the agent. Without that, your passive income will always be passive. You will never earn. The fourth important thing that you must know is that the most legitimate way of passive income is business itself. Without business, you have illegitimate expectations of generating revenue in passive ways. Let me give you an example. A business, by definition, is the agency of the owner, the agency of the founder. So it's very important for you to know that at no any time that the person that you give money will ever qualify as your agent. That is something that we have established. A bank will never be your agent. A private investment vehicle will never be your agent. An insurance company will never be your agent. An MMF product will never be your agent. So it's very important for you to understand that the most accurate, the most legitimate way that any person anywhere can generate passive income is by an individual considering to put in place a business. So what is a business? A business is any economic generating venture that does not require the presence of its owner or the founder in order for it to run. That is classic. The most accurate, legitimate way that you can generate money in passive way is by putting in place a business. Without a business, it is a scam even to think of passive income. It's very important even to ask yourself that when you're buying shares, if you buy shares without the instrumentation of an existence of a business, guess what? That is a scam. It's always important for you to understand that passive income, the only legitimate way is when you as an individual exhibit some form of control and ownership over that infrastructure, the infrastructure of agency. Without having a business, what you're talking about is merely a scam. The fifth and the most important thing that you need to understand is this. Any money that you generate out of an interest relationship is never passive. Any money that you generate out of a dividends relationship is never passive. In order for it to qualify as passive income, then you as the principal must be able to determine something that is very important, what is called dividends distribution ratio. The person who determines dividends distribution ratio, that individual is the one who qualifies as a principal. Allow me to give you an example. In mid-2010s, Safaricom floated their IPO. And the IPO was sold under this impression that the only way to make wealth is to buy shares. Kenyans from all walks of life lined to buy Safaricom shares. Among the many Kenyans that lined up to buy Safaricom shares, one of them was my wife. My wife bought Safaricom shares at a price of 10,000. So Safaricom took 10,000 of my wife's money to put into activity in their business. How much do you think that Safaricom calls the dividends that they give to my wife every year, not more than 200 shillings. Let me give you a reverse to that. Supposing my wife 10 years ago or 12 years ago, supposing my wife put in place a small business, let's just say a business where she was preparing mandazis. How much do you think, if she kept at it with the initial investment of 10,000 only, do you think that business would be worth today? That is what I need you to understand. The very moment you cannot determine dividends distribution ratio, that relationship does not qualify as passive income. Passive income is always a scam that is weaved by the wealthy to get resources of the poor under the pretext that the only legitimate way that you're going to earn is to give someone else your money. As long as you cannot determine dividends distribution ratios, whatever you think you're in, whatever relationship you think you've put in place is not passive income. At this point, allow me just to answer. Of the 5 important things, which one were you aware of prior to this video? I would really want to connect with you in the comment section below and let us engage. You might have something that I might have overlooked. I would really want to interact with you in the comment section below and let's learn from each other. My name is Omuga Ogwang, and I'm the principal at Franchise and Licensing Institute. One of the things that we help small businesses with is to convert your existing intellectual property to forms of your passive income relationships. You can earn in passive income from your copyright. You can earn in passive income from your trademarks. My name is Ogwang and I can't wait to hear from you. Let's engage in the comment section below and I will see you in the next one. Until then, take care, God bless, and bye-bye.